Hi there, I'm Rodrigue, community developer on Crusader Kings 3, and welcome to our July video update, during which we discuss the development of the game. This month we have taken a look at vessel contracts and how we have overhauled them. We've also taken a stab at character portraits, and finally, we have deep delved into user research. Take a look. With Matthew, programmer here at Paradox, we have taken a look at vessel contracts and how we have changed them since we discussed them in Diaries 17.
We weren't fully content with the initial implementation of the vassal contracts. They didn't help facilitate telling the stories between the vassals and lieges and the negotiations and drama involved in that relationship. And this was a sentiment shared by the community as well, so that echoed our desire to give this another look and change it up a bit before the release. This overhaul gives a lot of new options in the contracts for the vassals and the lieges, and these different options in the obligations help facilitate the drama and the narrative we want to come out from these interactions. We have split the base tax and levies into two different categories instead of one combined one, as well as adding various fine print options. These fine print options are things like religious protection if the vassal is of a different faith and it prevents the liege from taking hostile action against them, or things like coinage rights where they are given the permission to mint their own coins, and that's represented by an increase in development for the vassal. We have this beautiful parchment background, which we wanted to use to make the contracts really feel like they were an agreement drafted by the vassal and liege and signed with wax embossed seals of the respective characters' houses. Lower taxes and levies are obviously something the vassal will appreciate. It will increase their opinion of you, and on the flip side, higher taxes and levies will make them, like you less. Each different obligation option will increase or decrease the opinion. So if you give them a concession such as guaranteeing them a position on the council, they will also like you more, as opposed to if you were to take that away from them. If you don't give a fair contract, such as just increasing the taxes they have to pay, then you will take a tyranny hit amongst all your vassals for this action, as it is a breach of the feudal contract relationship that the liege and vassals have. If you want to make such unfair deals, then you can do it. If you want to offset the tyranny hit, you need to use a hook whilst you do so, to sort of blackmail the vassal into agreeing to your terms without raising too much of a fuss. The vassals can of course negotiate their own contracts with the liege. The difference for them is that they have to propose a fair trade. They can't give something unfair towards the liege. They have to make sure it's an even deal for both parties. They can themselves, of course, also use a hook if they want to have one deal in favor of them. All of these different obligations, their effects and what they mean are fully moddable. They're all exposed in our scripting language, so you can change as many of them as you want, add new ones, put them in different government forms, or take them out entirely.
With Niels, lead character artist, we have taken a look at portraits in CK3.
In CK3 we use a dynamic system to generate the portraits in the game, and the system works in a way that it gives each character something we call a DNA string, which stores and defines their appearance. So the system is very flexible in the sense that it allows us to add control for pretty much anything we want to control. And we've added a lot of detail control, especially for the face. So as an example, I could mention that the nose alone has something like 14 genes controlling its appearance and size. And there's also a lot of other genes for things like body type and body shape, and also things like hair color, skin color and eye color. Due to the fact that we're using the same base model for everyone, it's actually easy for us to blend between several different DNA sets. And this is good when it comes to inheritance, because when two characters get children, those children will end up looking like a blend between the parents. And there's also a small chance that some features will be inherited from their grandparents or even further back in the family tree. And overall inheritance has a much bigger impact than it did in CK2. So the system we use allows us to do truly seamless aging, and there's a lot of places we take advantage of this. There's some more obvious examples, like when it comes to body size and body proportions, which will obviously be very different between an infant and a fully grown adult. But there's a lot of more subtle examples as well, such as facial features will get more pronounced as a character ages through childhood, and especially as they reach puberty. And once they reach their 30s and 40s, their skin will start to look more rugged, and they will start showing some wrinkles. And as they approach old age, those wrinkles will be more pronounced and stronger, and their hair will turn grey, and other things will happen, such as they lose their teeth and they lose their posture. You can be scarred, both temporarily and permanently, so it can be fresh scars or healed scars that will show on the character. There's various other things, such as you can lose an arm, be blinded, or even disfigured. Yeah, so the Middle Ages were of course a time of gruesome diseases and epidemics, and this is something we also represent in the game. A few examples of such classic medieval diseases that we represent are smallpox, syphilis, leprosy, typhus, and of course, last but not least, Black Death. Yeah, so the barbershop feature allows you to customize your character's appearance. So you can select clothing and headgear, and also change your hairstyle and beard on your character in-game. So there's obviously a lot of characters in the game, and the vast majority of them have randomized or semi-randomized appearances, but there are some notable exceptions where we have custom designed appearances. For example, Harold Godwinson and William the Conqueror both have their appearances based on how they are described and depicted historically. Now, of course, medieval sources and portraitures aren't the most reliable, so we had to do a lot of guesswork and use some artistic license.
And finally, with Anna, user researcher here at Paradox, we have taken a look at user testing and how it affected the development of CK3.
I look at games from a user perspective, so that means that we try to test features and we gather feedback from players on how well they understand the game, how well menus work, if they think that the game is fun, if it's matching their expectations, things like that. So we do this by using a lot of methods that are commonly used in social sciences, but it's also important to remember that even though I have researcher as my working title, and although we use scientific methods, we aren't scientists, so we don't produce scientific results. It's rather to bring the dev team player feedback and to inspire discussion. By combining a bunch of methods, then we can actually gather how our players really feel about the game. But we usually start with observation, so that means that we have players play the game for a few hours and we watch them and then we take notes. We'll also have an interview and surveys afterwards. In interviews, we kind of ask similar questions, but we can also go back to things that we have observed. So like, I saw you struggling with this. Can you tell me a bit about this? Can you show me something about this? Listening to players early on is really good for any kind of game project, I think. CK3 is a very complex game, and we don't want to lose that. We still want to be able to give experienced players that know that they can still have the game that they want and expect in terms of complexity. But we also want to make sure that new players, they can understand the game and like the game, and they can also discover that like, oh, I inherited a title and now my nephew is dead, or like you marry a horse, you know, things like that. It's great if new people can experience that too. So it's quite common to use like colleagues, etc., when it's very early in the development process. And so for CK3, we help the dev team with evaluating the early designs for characters by putting together a survey and sending that out to our colleagues. And honestly, it was a good thing that we did, because we quickly discovered that the portraits were way too cartoony for most people. So it was back to the drawing board for the art team, which, I mean, that's a shame. But it was good that we discovered that so early on and that we could actually make those changes. And it was also a way for us to kind of gauge where the level of art was during other tests. So like, what do you think about the portraits? And if cartoony popped up, then we also brought that back to the art team. My favorite part of my work is, of course, to actually be creepy and watch people play the game. It's really fun to see what my colleagues have put together actually like come together, and to see someone experiencing it rather than just like, here's a portrait and here's a feature and here's a menu, but actually seeing that and seeing that in the hands of a player, that's super cool. Is the tutorial helpful enough for new players, but is it also not annoying to more experienced players? So for that test, it was a bit bigger. So we had 12 players, and 6 of them were what we would consider experienced players. So they had like between 200 to over 1,000 hours of playtime of CK2. And then 6 of the players were what we would consider newbies. So like, they had played strategy games, but for some reason or another, they just didn't pick up CK2. And so we let them try out the tutorial and play through that, and then we let them play the game for about 2 hours, and then we were sitting there looking at them and trying to see like, what can they use, what can they not use, are they enjoying themselves, things like that. So newer players, they really appreciated that parts of the tutorial were really visual in guiding them and showing them what to do. Older players, at first, some of them kind of struggled with getting used to a new UI, but that also was really helpful with the tutorial kind of showing them the way. But what was good was that they also really liked the suggestion system, because for them it became more of a like checklist, but more of a like, do I have everything under control in my kingdom? There were some areas that still needed work. Most of the new players and the old players kind of had the same issues, and again it had to do with navigating menus like the council menu and marriage menu, mostly just getting an overview of where characters were and how they related to your character. Well, COVID-19 has changed a lot of things for us in user research, and I think that the main thing for us has been that we don't have access to the lab in the Stockholm office. So at the lab we have about 20 computers that are prepped for us to use during tests, and now we've had to adapt by doing, well, basically all of our playtests remotely, and that means that players play on their own computers and we do interviews via video chat, so kind of like this, honestly. And like, I'll be honest, it's been quite difficult, but I think that an unexpected part was that we, of course, discovered that this works, and when it does, we can also have players from all over the world playing. So that's an interesting new perspective for us. Well, after the release of CK3, I will be working on gathering and reporting on feedback from, well, I guess you guys on Steam. So I'll be going over all of the written reviews and things like that to kind of gather high points and low points, so that I can bring that back to the dev team and they can start making a plan on what to address next. And also, of course, there will be patches and DLCs, so we'll start planning playtests for them as well.
And that is it for the month of July. If you want to know more, just click on the links below to get to the full dev diaries. If you feel like pre-ordering Crusader Kings 3, just go on crusaderkings.com. I will catch you next month, where we will be streaming the game on our Twitch channel.